Have you ever seen the re-anchor command in Fusion and wondered what it's for? Well, let me show you in this video some cool tips and tricks on how you can use it. So in this video, I'm going to show a couple good examples of where you might want to use the re-anchor command. I might want to build a frame out of 80/20 aluminum, so I'm going to insert from McMaster-Carr the 80/20 aluminum frame that I want. So I'm just make this a little bit larger, and I'll do a search for 80/20. And let's do the double framing rail, and let's do a 3-inch rail height. Now, as I scroll down, I'm just going to pick this first one here, this hollow example here. I only need one of them. Now you'll notice it's asking for a length. In fact, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit, select a CAD file type, and you'll notice it says please specify a length to download the CAD file. And it only gives me different lengths in feet, and the shortest one is 1 foot. So I'm going to go ahead and select 1 foot. I like to use 3D Step, and I'll say download. And I just got the 80/20 aluminum extrusion brought right into Fusion. I'll turn off ground to parent. I don't need that for now. I'll say OK, and if I click on one of these edges, we can verify that sure enough it is 12 inches in length. Now, what if I wanted this to be a different length, some random length like 22.5 inches, which obviously was not an option in the McMaster-Carr dialog. Well, I'm going to click this top face here and say press pull. Or I could come under modify and say offset face. It's going to give me the exact same result. If I say press pull, you'll notice it says offset face. Now if I start to drag, you'll notice it's giving me this number. And it's kind of hard to see, but you'll see this white arrow. So it's showing that it's moved just over an inch from where this arrow tip is. So this is where the blue face originally was, and we've offset it just over an inch. Well, there's a cool little option where these 3 little dots are right here. If I click on these 3 little dots, there's a command in here called re-anchor. So I'm going to click on re-anchor. And then I'm going to pick the bottom face of this extrusion. And you'll notice it says select perpendicular face for re-anchoring. So I'm going to click that face, and now this number, instead of being 1, it's like 13. And the arrowhead is now pointing to that bottom face. So it's measuring from the bottom of the part, and now the top blue face is 13 inches from the bottom. So now I could type in, for example, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. I could say 22.5, and I'll say OK. If I click on one of these edges, we can verify that sure enough, the length of this beam is now 22.5 inches. So all we did was basically re-reference. We said measure from the bottom of this part and offset from the bottom 22.5 inches. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of the re-anchor command. So I'm going to continue building the frame, and we're going to use re-anchor again here in just a little bit. So I now have the overall height. I want to maybe create kind of like a square frame. I could re-insert in the McMaster-Carr, but I would have to go through all those filters again and search for it and tell it that I want the 3-inch and then I want it the 12 inches long, etc., etc. Instead, I'm just going to copy this existing piece. Now, here is a tip that I'm going to share with you. I just said copy. If I right-click at the top level and I say paste, I'm going to get this result. I'm going to move that over. But if I try and offset this face, if I say press pull, you'll notice that it actually changes both of them. And I do not want it to change both of them. So I'm going to undo, and I'll right-click, and instead of saying paste, I'm going to say paste new. And what this does is it pastes a new copy that's not linked to the original one. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. I'll just move this over a little bit like so. And I'll do the same thing. I'll click on this face, I'll say press pull, and you'll notice as I move this, it's not affecting that other beam. But I want to set this to be a very specific length. So I'll say re-anchor, I'll pick this back face, and I'll say I want this to be 14.25 in length. And now, if I click on one of these edges, I can verify that is 14.25 inches in length. So that's really the power behind the re-anchor command. Okay, I'll throw a couple more tips in here real quick to make this video a little bit more interesting. I want to position this beam here next to this beam here, and this is where the Constrain Components really shines. If I were to use the joint command, because there's lots of curves and stuff on here, it would be a little bit difficult to align this beam with this beam. But with Constrain Components, check out how powerful this is. I could say line up that face with like one of these flat faces here. I'll add another constraint. I'll say that flat face line up with that flat face there. And now you can see how those line up. And then finally, I'll add a constraint and say like that bottom face with that bottom face. And now they're rigidly connected together and they're perfectly lined up. Okay, I'll go ahead and copy that part. Now I can just come in here. In this case, I want them to be the same, so I'll just say paste. I don't need to do a paste new. I'll bring that up. Quickly constrain the components again, so I'll just say that top face with that face there. I'll say this inside face with this outside face there, and maybe that face with that face. And now we have this result like so. And then lastly, I want to copy this frame here. So I'll say copy. Now I am going to say paste new in this case. I'm going to bring that over because we're going to change the length here, and I don't want this copy to affect that copy. So I'm going to say paste new. And once again, really quickly, I'll just line these guys up real fast. I do really like this new Constrain Components command inside of Fusion. It makes it really fast. Okay, so now we have this frame that's built together. And let's say I wanted to change the length of this. I could come in here and say move copy. And I want to make sure that my move object is usually defaulted to bodies. I want to make sure it's set to faces. And I could just draw a selection box that kind of covers over this whole right side of this frame. And if I start to drag, notice where this blue dot is. That's kind of the reference or the pivot. And that doesn't make much sense. So I'm going to come over here and say set pivot. And I'm just going to pick maybe like this point right here. It's on this front edge or on this front face. And then I'm going to click that green checkbox saying I'm done setting the pivot. So what I'm basically saying is measure from here. And when I start to drag, you can see that's where that arrow was measuring from. Now we can come in and say re-anchor. Let's measure off the other side of the assembly. So way over here. And you can see that the arrow is measuring from this side over here to this front face over here. And I can specify the total length. I want that to be 21.75. I'll say OK. And you can see that it moved all of the faces of this vertical beam. And then it basically stretched the faces of it basically stretched or moved these faces to the right, and so these faces grew. So that's kind of the cool thing with the move faces. It's almost like we basically stretched this whole thing apart. Now, if we were to measure this, I'll measure from that face there to that face there. We can see that sure enough, it's 21.75. So that's the power of using the re-anchor command. I hope you learned something new and enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure you've hit like and subscribe. That way you'll be notified of upcoming videos. If you'd like to learn more about Fusion, make sure you visit my webpage at cadedllc.com. And as always, have fun learning Fusion.